The low hum of fluorescent lights filled the aisles of the grocery store, where Deja Thompson stood at the self-checkout, tried to ignore the uncomfortable weight of the stairs. Her fingers danced quickly over the keypad, entering the digits of her total, when she felt a tap on her shoulder. "Excuse me," a voice said behind her. Deja turned, already bracing herself. He was a middle-aged man, white, dressed in a crisp, overpriced polo shirt, and holding a basket full of organic, overpriced products that no one could pronounce. He smiled at her, but it wasn't kind. "You're holding up the line," he said, his voice smooth but condescending. "I don't think you're supposed to be using that lane. Should have gone to a regular register." Deja's heart beat faster. She glanced around. No one else seemed to notice the tension thickening in the air. The sound of other customers scanning their groceries was deafening. She could feel their eyes on her. "I'm doing just fine," Deja replied, her voice steady, but inside, her mind was racing. Was this another subtle reminder of her place? Another token of the everyday racism she'd grown used to? The man raised an eyebrow, dismissing her with a huff. "I'm just saying, maybe you should leave the technology to people who understand it." For a second, Deja froze. His words, so casual, so poisonous, punched through the noise of the store. She clenched her jaw, but then something inside her sparked. She smiled, but it wasn't a smile of submission. It was a smile that said, "You don't know what you've just started." She pressed the pay button, took her receipt, and turned. The man watched her walk away, but he would soon learn that Deja wasn't a woman to be dismissed. Not anymore. Deja Thompson was almost at the end of her grocery run, the scanner beeping with each item she added to her cart. The self-checkout aisle, tucked away in the corner of the store, was usually quiet, the hum of the machines and the occasional soft chatter of customers the only sounds. But today it felt different. Every glance from the other shoppers seemed to linger a bit too long, as if waiting for something to happen. Deja tried not to think about it, focusing instead on the screen in front of her. She swiped her debit card, a quick motion she perfected over years of doing this exact routine. But as she punched in her PIN, a voice interrupted the rhythm of the moment. "Excuse me." Deja stiffened, her hand freezing on the keypad. She turned slowly, her breath caught in her throat. Standing behind her was a man, probably in his mid-40s, dressed in an expensive polo shirt that screamed "I shop at boutique stores." He held a basket of fresh organic produce, like it was a badge of honor, the green leafy vegetables and brightly colored fruit standing in stark contrast to his pasty white complexion. "Can I help you?" Deja asked, her voice calm, but there was a tension pulling at her chest. "You're holding up the line," the man said, his tone smooth but dismissive. "I don't think you're supposed to be using this lane. It's for people who actually know how to use the technology." Deja's eyes flickered to the empty self-checkout lanes, then back at the man, who was standing a little too close. She took a deep breath. He didn't even seem to notice the way his words cut through the air like a blade, his casual confidence masking something far more insidious. "I'm doing just fine," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. It was a practiced response, one she used to maintain composure when the world around her threatened to push her down. He gave her a condescending smile. "I'm just saying, maybe you should leave the technology to people who understand it." He didn't even bother to look at the machine as he spoke, his eyes focused solely on her, sizing her up. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The world around her became muffled, as if the store had faded into background, leaving her alone in a bubble of discomfort. Deja's fingers curled into a fist around the edge of the scanner, her nails digging into the plastic. His words lingered in the air, each one more toxic than the last. "Excuse me," she said, her voice colder now. The tension in her chest simmered, ready to burst. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly uninterested in what she had to say. He made a small, dismissive gesture toward her bag of groceries. "I'm just trying to help you," he added, his tone dripping with superiority. The words stung, the implication hanging heavy between them. He wasn't helping her. He was trying to put her in her place. He wasn't even apologizing for his rudeness. He was acting as though this moment, this tiny sliver of time, was just another incident of a black woman not knowing her place. Deja's heart raced. She'd seen this before. The little comments, the looks, The ways people, often unknowingly, place their judgment upon her. It wasn't just him. It was them. The white people who assumed they were better because of their skin. It was in the subtle way they looked at her like she was out of place. It was in the way people never assumed she belonged. She knew it deep in her bones. But this time, something was different. Deja felt the anger rising inside of her, hot and raw. Not today, she thought. She wasn't going to let him dismiss her, not without some kind of response. She smiled at him, but it wasn't a smile of submission. It wasn't one of compliance. It was a smile that, for the briefest moment, held power. And as she finished scanning the last of her items and pressed the pay button, she looked at him again, this time holding his gaze. "Thank you for the advice," she said sweetly, "but I'm doing just fine." The man's smile faltered. Deja grabbed her receipt and turned, her heels clicking against the tile floor as she walked away. His words hung in the air behind her, but they didn't touch her now. She had a plan. As she reached the exit, her hand still gripping the bag of groceries, Deja's mind raced. She wasn't done here. No, she was just getting started. She had a business deal in mind, something that would make this encounter more than just a fleeting moment of humiliation. She wasn't just a woman in a grocery store. She was Deja Thompson, and this man had no idea what he just triggered. Deja sat in the corner of her small apartment, the light from her laptop casting a soft glow against the darkened walls. Her mind kept returning to the man in the grocery store, the way he had looked at her, the way he had sized her up before opening his mouth. His words had sunk in deep, more than she cared to admit. She wasn't sure what bothered her more, his overt disrespect or the way it reminded her of the subtle, pervasive nature of racism that followed her everywhere. She pushed the thought away and focused on her laptop screen. She had work to do, marketing reports, deadlines. She clicked through tabs, opening emails, but none of it seemed to matter. Her thoughts circled back to him, the smug look on his face, his unearned confidence. That's when Liza's text popped up on the screen. "Liza, how'd it go today? Anything interesting?" Deja stared at the screen, wondering how to explain the incident without sounding too emotional. But Liza was her best friend. She would understand. This man at the grocery store." She paused, fingers hovering above the keys. She was about to type something more when Liza's call came through. "Girl," Liza said, her voice brimming with concern, "tell me what happened." Deja sighed, leaning back in her chair. It was just another one of those things. You know, where they don't even realize they're being rude. He basically told me I didn't belong in the self-checkout lane because, get this, I don't know how to use the technology. Liza's silence on the other end of the phone was enough for Deja to hear her friend's jaw drop. Did you just let that slide?" Deja laughed bitterly. "What else can I do? It's not like anything's going to change." "No," Liza said, a fierce edge to her voice. "This is exactly why you need to start fighting back. Look, I'm not saying you should blow up on every ignorant person you meet, but that's bullshit. You can't just let him get away with it. You can't keep swallowing it." Deja frowned, sitting up straighter. "What do you mean? I don't even know where to start. Liza, I don't want to make a scene. I don't need to make him or anyone else feel uncomfortable. But I don't know how long I can keep ignoring it either." "Exactly. You can't just ignore it anymore. You've been swallowing that kind of disrespect for years, Deja. You've been quiet and professional, which is great for your career. But what's it gotten you? More of the same. You've got power, girl. You just don't know it yet." Deja's chest tightened. Power? She had power. The word bounced around in her head, uncomfortable and foreign. She didn't feel powerful. She felt tired. She felt like she had to play by everyone else's rules in order to be seen. But she also couldn't deny the fire that was sparking in her chest at Liza's words. "What do you mean, power?" Deja asked. Liza chuckled softly. "What if you use your skills, your creativity, your ability to see what others don't? What if you turn all that into something of your own? You could do it. I know you can." Deja paused, considering the idea. Something of my own. She had always been good at spotting trends, analyzing consumer behavior, and creating marketing strategies. But a business of her own? That felt like a stretch. I don't know, Liza. That's a lot of work, and I don't have the resources. You've got the resources inside of you. You know how to hustle. You just need to find the right angle. Hell, after today, you should be pissed enough to do something about it. The fire was still there, simmering just beneath her skin. Okay, I'll think about it. I've got some ideas, but I'll need help. That's what I'm here for, Liza said with a laugh. Start writing it down. Get serious. I'm not saying you have to quit your job tomorrow, but start planning. Build something bigger than that guy ever will. Deja couldn't help but smile at her friend's energy. Maybe Liza was right. Maybe it was time to do more than just survive. Maybe it was time to fight back in a way that truly mattered. I'll do it, Deja said finally, a sense of resolve beginning to form in her chest. I'll find a way. I'll make something happen. As the call ended and Deja sat in the quiet of her apartment, she felt a shift. The resentment from the grocery store incident still lingered, but now it was coupled with something new. Determination. She opened a blank document on her laptop and started typing. Business idea. Something that speaks to the challenges I face every day. A solution, a platform. Empowerment. Let's see where this takes me. The days following her conversation with Liza felt strangely quiet. Deja's mind buzzed with possibilities, but the weight of her current job kept pulling her back. She found herself staring at her laptop screen long after her work hours ended, brainstorming ideas for her business, something that could give her both the power and the control she had always felt was just out of reach. It wasn't that she didn't love marketing. She did, but the constraints of her current corporate environment, where decisions were made by men in boardrooms who only ever looked at her as the black woman in the room, were wearing on her. She was constantly fighting for respect, often overlooked, often dismissed. What could she build that would not only change her life, but also stand as a testament to everyone like her who faced the same invisible barriers? Her thoughts were interrupted by the ping of an email. It was from Liza. Liza, girl, I found something for you. There's a seminar on entrepreneurship next week, speaking directly to the people of color who are breaking barriers in business. You should check it out. I think it might help you get some focus. Deja stared at the email for a moment. Entrepreneurship. The word echoed in her head like a drumbeat. It was one thing to dream about doing something for herself, but taking action? That was something else entirely. She clicked on the link and skimmed the details of the seminar. It was being held downtown at a community center that offered resources for aspiring business owners from marginalized groups. The keynote speaker was a successful businesswoman, Tamara Jenkins, known for launching a tech company aimed at diversifying the industry. It felt like the universe was offering her a sign. Without hesitation, Deja registered. The day of the seminar arrived with the city alive in its usual hum of activity. Deja, dressed in a simple blazer and slacks, walked into the community center, her nerves mixing with the anticipation bubbling in her stomach. The room was filled with a mix of people, young, older, black, Latina, Asian. All of them, like her, were there with one goal, to build something that could change their lives. As she took her seat, her eyes scanned the room. She saw the hopeful glint in the eyes of the other attendees, the quiet determination in their expressions. Deja's heart pounded as she realized this was more than just an opportunity. It was a spark she had been waiting for. The lights dimmed, and the keynote speaker, Tamara Jenkins, took the stage. The crowd grew silent as she began to speak, her voice strong, confident, yet welcoming. She told her story about growing up in a working-class neighborhood, facing systemic racism, and launching her own company in an industry that had never been designed for people like her. Tamara's words hit Deja with the force of a wave. When you face adversity, don't shrink. Don't let the world tell you that you don't belong. Own your place and use the power of your experience to fuel the change you want to see. It was the first time Deja had ever heard someone speak with such authority about the challenges she faced daily. Her entire life, she had been forced to navigate spaces that weren't meant for her. Corporate spaces, retail spaces, even her own neighborhood. But Tamara was speaking about using that very struggle as fuel. By the time the seminar ended, Deja was both exhausted and inspired. She found herself lingering at the back of the room, watching as Tamara answered questions from the audience. The moment felt electric, charged with possibility. Deja had always known she was capable, but today, she felt like she had a purpose. As the crowd started to disperse, Deja made her way toward Tamara, unsure what to expect, but certain that she had to at least try. She watched as Tamara spoke to other aspiring business owners, offering advice and connections. When it was her turn, Deja took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Ms. Jenkins," Deja said, her voice steady but full of hope, "I just wanted to thank you for your talk. It was really powerful. I've been thinking about starting my own business, but I don't even know where to begin. I could really use some guidance." Tamara looked at her, her eyes warm. "You're not the first person to feel that way," she said, offering a smile. "But the first step is always believing that you have something valuable to offer. What's your idea?" Deja hesitated for only a moment before speaking. "I want to build something that gives voice to people like me. I want to create a platform for people who are overlooked, who don't get the opportunities. I want to show them that they can do more than just survive, they can thrive." Tamara studied her for a moment before nodding. "I like it. I really do. And I can tell you're serious about this. The first thing you need is a solid plan. Let me give you some resources that can help with the next steps." Deja's heart leaped. She hadn't expected this, not so soon. But now, with Tamara's guidance, she felt like she had found the path forward. Maybe the world wasn't going to change overnight, but this was a start. That night, Deja sat at her kitchen table. The pages of notes she had taken from the seminar spread in front of her. Her mind was racing, filled with possibilities. She could already see the pieces coming together. She had a plan, an idea that could not only change her life, but could be the beginning of something much bigger. The spark had been lit. Now, it was time to fan the flames. The next few weeks felt like a blur. Deja threw herself into her business idea with a level of intensity she hadn't felt in years. The days began to blur together, with late nights spent researching, drafting plans, and refining her concept. Liza was there every step of the way, providing encouragement and helping her brainstorm. They talked constantly about the business, about the future, and about how to take her ideas from vision to reality. But as Deja's concept solidified, something kept nagging at the back of her mind. She had wanted to simply create, to offer a platform, a resource, a service that could empower people like her. But she quickly realized that her initial idea, while valuable, wouldn't be enough to make a real dent. She needed something bigger. Then, as if the universe had heard her inner conflict, a moment of inspiration struck. Deja was sitting in her apartment late one night, flipping through business articles on her laptop when her eyes landed on something. A news clip about Greg, the man from the grocery store. It was an interview with him about his latest venture, a startup focused on new tech for efficiency in retail. Greg was being hailed as a rising star in the tech world, a self-made man who had worked his way up from humble beginnings. The article didn't mention any of the small details that Deja knew so well. The way he tried to talk down to her, his casual dismissal of her in that store had stuck with her, and now, reading about his so-called success, a surge of frustration bubbled up inside her. She didn't know why, but suddenly everything clicked. She had the idea. She opened a new document on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Her mind raced with the possibilities. The proposal. Deja leaned back in her chair, staring at the draft she'd written. The idea was simple but effective. A business collaboration that would allow her to showcase her marketing expertise while also addressing the issue of efficiency, but not in the way Greg intended. Instead of focusing on technology alone, Deja wanted to create a platform that used technology to amplify voices that were often silenced in the business world. It would combine tech solutions for retail while also offering mentorship and resources for people from marginalized communities, something that Greg's business would never even think to consider. The proposal was bold. She knew it was risky, but she also knew it had the potential to disrupt an entire industry, to shake up the power structures that she had been navigating her entire life. With her proposal ready, Deja hesitated for only a moment before typing Greg's email address. She hit send. The next morning, Deja was sipping her coffee when her phone buzzed with an incoming email. She picked it up, blinking as she read the subject line. Business proposal. She clicked it open, holding her breath. Greg's email was short and to the point. Greg, Deja, I'm intrigued. Let's talk. We can set up a meeting. How's next Tuesday at 10 a.m.? Deja stared at the screen, her mind reeling. She hadn't expected a response at all, let alone one this quick. She almost laughed at herself. I knew I could do this, she thought. Now, it's time to see where this takes me. Deja spent the next few days preparing for the meeting. She knew this was her shot. If she could pull this off, it would change everything. But she also had to be cautious. Greg might not take her seriously, or worse, he might try to steal her idea. She had to stay one step ahead. Always. She arrived at the meeting, dressed sharply but not overdone, wanting to project confidence without seeming too eager. Greg was already there, sitting behind a sleek, modern desk, his expression unreadable as she entered the conference room. Deja, he said, standing up and offering her a firm handshake. Thanks for coming. I've had a chance to look over your proposal, and I have to say I'm impressed. Deja smiled, trying to keep her cool. I'm glad to hear that. Greg motioned for her to sit. So let's get down to it. You've got an interesting concept here. I think there's potential, but I need to know what exactly you're asking for me. Deja had been expecting this question. I want to collaborate, she said, keeping her voice steady. I want to combine your technology with my platform, one that can help companies like yours access a more diverse talent pool, while also providing mentorship and resources to underrepresented groups. It's about changing the way business is done. It's about giving back while also moving forward. Greg leaned back in his chair, clearly thinking. Deja could feel the weight of his scrutiny, but she didn't flinch. She had prepared for this. So you want me to partner with you, to put my name behind this? Why would I do that? What's in it for me? Deja met his gaze directly. It's simple. You're a leader in the tech world, but you're missing the point. You're not just building technology. You're building relationships, and those relationships can't be one-sided. I'm offering you the chance to build something with real, lasting impact. If you want to build a legacy, not just a business, this is your chance. Greg paused. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, not by someone who looked like her. But Deja could see the wheels turning in his mind. She had planted the seed. I'll need some time to think about it, he said finally, but we'll talk again soon. I'm not opposed to the idea. You got guts. I'll give you that. Deja stood up, her heart pounding, but her head held high. Thank you. I'll be waiting for your response. As she walked out of the meeting, Deja felt a sense of exhilaration she hadn't expected. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She had taken control of the situation. She had stepped into the room a woman who had been dismissed, and she was leaving as someone who would no longer be ignored. The battle wasn't over, but this was just the beginning. The following week felt like an eternity. Every moment Deja spent in her office, the tension from the meeting with Greg loomed over her, both thrilling and suffocating. She had delivered her pitch, planted the seed, but would he bite? Her phone buzzed with a new email notification. She didn't need to check to know who it was from. She clicked it open, the subject line reading, "Let's talk further, business proposal." She took a deep breath and opened the email. Greg, Deja, I've had a chance to think things through and I'm intrigued. I want to see if this collaboration can really work. Let's meet again next Thursday to discuss terms. Let me know if that works for you. Deja's pulse quickened. This was it. She typed a quick reply to confirm, feeling the gravity of what this could mean. The next few days were filled with preparation. This was a business deal, not a favor. She had to go in with the confidence of someone who knew her worth. No more second-guessing. No more shrinking. This was her moment. The meeting was set for Thursday at 10 a.m. in a conference room at Greg's company headquarters. Deja dressed in a fitted navy blazer and a pair of tailored slacks, sharp, professional, but not intimidating. She wanted to project authority, without overdoing it. When she arrived, Greg greeted her at the door, offering a quick handshake. He led her into a sleek, glass-walled conference room. The space felt too clean, too polished, as though it belonged to a world she didn't quite inhabit. It reminded her of the way Greg had looked at her in the grocery store, like she didn't belong in this world, but he was willing to let her try. "Please, take a seat," he said, motioning toward a chair across from his. She sat, setting her briefcase down on the table, feeling the subtle shift in the air. This time, there was no condescension in his posture, only the calculated coolness of someone who knew he was in control. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Greg began, folding his hands in front of him. "And I have to admit, you got some strong points. But I want to know more about how this partnership benefits my company. I'm interested, but I need to see how your vision aligns with our goals." Deja nodded, ready for this. She had anticipated this exact line of questioning. It wasn't about the idea anymore. It was about the value it would bring to Greg's company, and ultimately to him. She opened her briefcase and slid a few papers across the table, including a detailed breakdown of the potential benefits. "Here's a proposal that outlines the key metrics for the collaboration. Your company, for example, can tap into a market segment that is sorely underrepresented in tech and retail, specifically people of color. By offering a platform that gives access to mentorship and resources for underrepresented communities, you not only open up new markets, but also enhance your brand image, making it more socially responsible and progressive." Greg scanned the papers, his expression unreadable. "I'm not sure I'm seeing the full picture here. Are you suggesting that my company is lacking in diversity?" Deja took a breath. The subtle microaggression in his words was not lost on her, but she refused to let it derail her. "No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's room for growth. And there's a great opportunity for us to be at the forefront of that growth. Look at the social impact. Look at how your company could lead the way in corporate responsibility." Greg didn't immediately respond. Instead, he shifted in his chair, clearly processing her words. His next question was more direct, though no less loaded. "And what's your cut in all of this? How do we divvy up the rewards?" Deja met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm asking for a 50-50 partnership. You provide the technology, the infrastructure, and I'll handle the marketing, the outreach, and the building of the platform. Together, we can create something that's not just profitable, but meaningful." Greg leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. 50-50 is a pretty steep ask, don't you think?" Deja didn't flinch. "I don't think it's steep at all. What you're getting is an opportunity to partner with someone who has experience in the marketing world, someone who understands the needs of the communities we're targeting, and someone who isn't afraid to push boundaries. I'm bringing the vision. You're bringing the tech. Together, we make it work." She paused for a moment, allowing the weight of her words to settle in the air. "You're not just getting an idea, Greg. You're getting a movement." For the first time, Greg's eyes narrowed with something that could almost be described as respect. He sat up straighter, his posture shifting slightly. The balance of power in the room was subtly but definitively shifting. "All right," he said slowly, his tone contemplative. "I'll admit you've got my attention, but I'll need to run this by the board. Let's schedule another meeting after I've discussed it with them." Deja nodded, not disappointed. This was the kind of response she had expected. The board was always the last hurdle, but it was a hurdle she was prepared to clear. "Of course," she said, standing up to leave. "But when you talk to them, just remember, what I'm offering is more than just a partnership. It's a chance to be a part of something that lasts. It's a chance to make history." Greg stood too, shaking her hand with a firm grip. "I'll be in touch soon. And, Deja, you've got guts. I'll give you that." As Deja walked out of the meeting, she felt a quiet satisfaction, but she knew the real work was just beginning. The next step was securing the deal, and that meant proving to Greg and to herself that she wasn't just a woman who had been dismissed. She was a woman who would change the game. Deja didn't wait idly after her meeting with Greg. She couldn't, while she played the waiting game. She also kept building. The days following her discussion with Greg were a whirlwind of activity. Every evening, after her 9-to-5 job, she sat at her kitchen table, reviewing her business plan, fine-tuning her pitch, and reaching out to potential mentors and investors. There was something about the anticipation of a big decision, the push and pull between waiting for an answer and forging ahead that made Deja feel more alive than she had in years. But deep down, she knew she couldn't just rely on Greg's approval. This had to be bigger than him. Liza had been her rock, offering insight and advice on everything from the legalities of starting a business to how to present herself confidently in front of potential investors. The world's not going to hand you anything, Deja. Liza often reminded her. You've got to fight for every inch. And fight Deja did. Every day felt like another small victory. She managed to secure a couple of meetings with local investors, leveraging her marketing background to show them just how much untapped potential there was in the market for her platform. She was building momentum, and it felt good. One afternoon, just as she was finishing up a call with a potential partner, Deja's phone buzzed. She froze when she saw the name, Greg. Her heart skipped a beat. Here it is. She answered the call before she could second-guess herself. Hello? Deja, Greg's voice crackled through the line. I've spoken with the board, and they're on board with your proposal. We're ready to move forward, but there are a few things we need to iron out first. Deja's stomach flipped, a mixture of relief and excitement flooding her chest. I'm glad to hear that, Greg. I'm looking forward to working together. Great, he said, his voice sounding more businesslike now, more detached. I think we're going to make a lot of money off this, Deja. But I need to be clear, this is a business arrangement, not a charity. You've got to prove the worth of your side of things. Understand. Deja's fingers tightened around the phone, but she forced herself to remain calm. I understand, and I can prove it. I'll have my legal team reach out to you soon to finalize the details, Greg continued. Let's aim for a formal meeting next week. She could tell from his tone that the deal was close to final, and despite his businesslike detachment, she felt the power in the moment. This is it, she thought. I'm doing it. Looking forward to it, she replied, trying to sound as composed as possible. They exchanged pleasantries, and the call ended. Deja sat back in her chair, her heart still racing. It was happening. The first step of what would be a long journey had been taken. The next few days were a blur. Legal paperwork. Negotiations over the specifics of the partnership. Deja had expected some of the details to be difficult, but she wasn't prepared for the subtle ways Greg tried to take control. During one meeting, when the conversation shifted toward profit sharing, Greg tried to push for a 70-30 split in his favor, citing his company's resources. Deja wasn't having it. She calmly but firmly pushed back, explaining why a 50-50 split was the only fair option. Greg wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like her. But by the end of the meeting, he had relented. All right, fine. 50-50, Greg had conceded, though his eyes were narrowed with frustration. But we're taking this one step at a time. I want results. Deja smiled, a quiet victory humming in her chest. Results will come, Greg. I'm just getting started. Later that evening, Deja stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back at her seemed different, stronger, more focused. This wasn't the same Deja who had walked into that grocery store, humiliated by a man who thought she didn't belong. This was the Deja who had turned that humiliation into something powerful. This was the Deja who had found her voice, and now she was using it. She'd had a fight for everything. The business deal, her dignity. And even now, she knew there would be more challenges ahead. There would be moments when Greg would try to push her aside, moments when the weight of the world would threaten to pull her back down. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Deja knew the battle was far from over. But for the first time, she felt like she had control. She was no longer fighting just for survival. She was fighting to change everything. And nothing was going to stop her. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of progress. But there was something else in the air, a quiet, simmering anticipation. Deja's business with Greg was officially in motion. The partnership was formalized, the contract signed, and the first steps toward launching their new platform were well underway. She had spent countless hours working on the marketing strategy, developing a brand that would speak directly to underrepresented communities. Deja wasn't just about launching a business. She was launching a movement, a business that not only offered a tech solution, but also uplifted voices that had been silenced for too long. But amid all the excitement, Deja could sense something beneath the surface. Greg had agreed to the 50-50 split, but his subtle attempts to undermine her were growing more frequent. He pushed for control over decisions he didn't understand, offering opinions on marketing strategies that showed his complete lack of comprehension of the communities they were targeting. Every now and then, he would throw a remark about the pace of progress, as though expecting Deja to pull off miracles overnight. The final straw came one evening, when Deja was going over a draft of the company's first promotional video. Greg had sent her an email with a set of changes, one of which involved using stereotypical, cliched images of the community they were trying to help, reinforcing biases instead of challenging them. It was a glaring example of the disconnect between Greg's corporate world and the very communities Deja was trying to empower. She couldn't let this slide. Not now. Not after everything she had fought for. The next morning, Deja requested an urgent meeting with Greg. She didn't ask. She didn't wait. She simply told him they had to talk. She needed this conversation to happen face-to-face, to clear the air. When they met in the same sleek, glass-walled conference room where they had first discussed a partnership, Deja's heart beat in her throat. She knew this was a turning point. "Greg," she started, her voice calm but firm, "we need to address something important." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, clearly anticipating a standard business discussion. "Sure, what's on your mind?" Deja placed a draft of the promotional video on the table, pushing it toward him. "This." She pointed to the imagery he had suggested. "This isn't the message we should be sending. It's tone-deaf and it's harmful." Greg looked at the paper, unfazed. "I don't see the issue. It's clean. It'll resonate with the mainstream. The goal here is to make the product appealing to everyone." "No," Deja said, her voice steady but unwavering. "The goal is to empower the people we're trying to help, not to make them feel like a commodity. This project isn't about fitting into a pre-packaged, acceptable idea of what diversity looks like. It's about representation that's authentic." Greg's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, the air between them felt thick with tension. "I think you're overreacting, Deja. This is how business works. We need to get the mainstream audience first. Otherwise, this will flop." Deja stood, taking a slow, deliberate step toward him. She felt the weight of everything she'd fought for, the battles at the grocery store, the constant need to prove herself, the countless moments when the world told her she wasn't enough. All of it boiled over in that room. "You don't get it, Greg," she said, her voice steady, but the fire inside her had ignited. "This isn't about playing it safe. This is about doing what's right, about showing the world what real diversity looks like, what real empowerment feels like. This isn't about you. It's about something bigger than both of us." Greg stared at her, the words hanging in the air, the silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "I'm not going to let you undermine what we're building," Deja continued, her voice stronger now, her confidence undeniable. "If you can't see that, then maybe this partnership is not what I thought it was." For a long moment, Greg said nothing. Then, finally, he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "All right, Deja, I'll back off on this one. You're right. But just remember, business is about results." Deja's chest tightened with the weight of her words. "Results don't mean anything if you've compromised your values along the way." The meeting ended on a tense but productive note. Deja knew she had won this battle, but this was only the beginning. The real test was yet to come, the public test. That evening, as she sat at her desk, she saw the familiar buzz of social media notifications on her phone. She opened her inbox and saw a series of messages from an online forum that had been created for people who were following her business's journey. One message caught her eye, the subject line reading, "Greg's past. The truth comes out." She clicked a link, and what she saw made her stomach churn. The article detailed Greg's history, how he had been involved in a series of racially insensitive incidents throughout his career, both in public and private. His company's diversity initiatives had been nothing more than a public relations stunt. His reputation had been built on a foundation of exclusion, even though he had positioned himself as an advocate for social change. Deja's heart raced as she read the article. It wasn't just a few missteps. It was a pattern of behavior, a systemic disregard for the very issues she was fighting for. She couldn't believe it had been kept under wraps for so long. But now, it was out in the open, and there was no way to ignore it. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Liza. Liza, Deja, have you seen this? The truth about Greg's company is finally coming to light. This could be your moment. What are you going to do about it? Deja stared at the screen for a long time, her mind racing. She had spent so long building something that was bigger than herself, fighting for the chance to give a voice to the voiceless, to stand up for the marginalized. But now, with Greg's past exposed, it was no longer just about business. It was about justice. Her heart pounded as she typed her response. This is it. It's time to take him down. The days that followed Greg's public exposure felt like a whirlwind. Deja's phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, news outlets, social media, even emails from strangers offering their support. The revelation of Greg's past had set off a chain reaction. People were angry, disillusioned, and questioning everything they thought they knew about the man who had once been held up as a model of success. The article had hit hard, exposing Greg's hypocrisy and the deep flaws in his business practices. It didn't take long for public outcry to reach a fever pitch. Social media exploded with posts calling for boycotts of Greg's company, while activists and leaders in the community began calling for accountability. For Deja, the fallout was both vindicating and bittersweet. She had always known something wasn't right, but now it was all out in the open. Greg had been riding on the coattails of a reputation that didn't match his actions, and the truth had finally come to light. But even as she watched Greg's empire crumble, there was a heavy feeling in her chest. This wasn't just about taking him down. It was about how she had allowed herself to become entangled with someone like him in the first place. Her phone rang, and she didn't need to check the screen to know it was Liza. "Girl, have you seen the news?" Liza's voice crackled through the line, filled with excitement. "Greg's done. People are finally waking up to who he really is. You gotta be feeling pretty good right now, huh?" Deja took a deep breath, glancing out the window of her apartment. The city was bustling, but the view outside felt distant. "I don't know, Liza. It's a relief, yes, but there's a part of me that feels uneasy. I've been so focused on building my business and taking him down, but now that it's happening, it feels different." Liza paused, sensing the change in Deja's tone. "I get it. You've been fighting this battle for so long, and now that it's coming to fruition, it's like you won. But you're right. It's never that simple." Deja rubbed her temples. "I feel like I'm finally starting to understand why this is so much bigger than me. It's not just about beating him at his own game. It's about how this system is built, how it's rigged against people like me, and how much it costs to fight back." Liza's voice softened. "That's the truth, Deja. It's always been bigger than just one person. But you've done something incredible. You've exposed the cracks in the system, and you've done it with integrity, which is more than most people can say." Deja nodded slowly, absorbing her friend's words. As much as she tried to focus on the triumph of the moment, the emotional toll of the past weeks lingered. The public acknowledgement of Greg's wrongdoings was satisfying, but it had come at a cost. The weight of the battle, the emotional and psychological toll of fighting against a system built to keep people like her down, had been heavy. But Deja wasn't one to wallow in defeat. The next morning, she made a decision. It was time to take full control of her narrative. She couldn't let Greg's fall from grace be the defining moment of her journey. It was only the beginning. The following days were a blur of press conferences, interviews, and social media campaigns. Deja used her newfound platform to share her story, not just as a victim of systemic racism, but as a woman who had overcome it. She talked about the emotional toll it took to build her business, the challenges she had faced in trying to prove herself in spaces that weren't meant for her. She spoke about the emotional cost of fighting for something that was inherently just, and how, despite it all, she had found a way to succeed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about empowering others to do the same, to use their voices, their experiences, and their skills to build something that truly represented who they were. Greg's company, once a titan of the industry, began to unravel. The board of directors ousted him, and his reputation, once polished and revered, began to deteriorate. Deja watched on the sidelines as his empire collapsed, but it didn't bring her the sense of satisfaction she thought it would. She had achieved what she set out to do, but at a cost she hadn't fully anticipated. One evening, as Deja sat in her apartment, reviewing the numbers from her latest round of fundraising, she received a call from Tamara Jenkins, the mentor who would become a guiding force in her journey. "Deja," Tamara said, her voice warm and reassuring, "I've been following your progress. You've done something extraordinary. But I want you to remember something." Deja leaned back in her chair, listening intently. "You're not done yet," Tamara continued. "You've built something solid, but the work has only just begun. There are more battles to fight, more spaces to change, and more voices to elevate. Don't stop now, Deja. You've got the world watching. Don't forget why you started." Deja closed her eyes, absorbing Tamara's words. The work has only just begun. She knew Tamara was right. The battle for equality, for representation, for justice wasn't just one moment in time. It was a lifelong pursuit. But Deja was no longer afraid. She had faced the system. She had taken on the giants. And, for the first time, she knew she had the power to change the world. Weeks passed, and the dust began to settle. Greg's fall from grace had been swift and brutal. The once celebrated CEO was now a name whispered in shame across newsrooms and social media. Deja had watched, both satisfied and solemn, as the pieces of his empire crumbled. The board of directors had stripped him of his position, and shareholders had pulled their investments. His public apologies, half-hearted and late, only served to further tarnish his reputation. But as Deja stood before a crowd at a social justice conference, speaking about her journey, her own feelings were conflicted. The applause that echoed through the hall felt nice, but it didn't bring her the sense of finality she'd anticipated. This wasn't a movie with a neatly tied-up ending. There was no fairy tale moment where the villain was punished and the hero rode off into the sunset. Greg's downfall was justice, but it wasn't her victory. She had fought for something more profound than personal revenge. She had fought for systemic change, for a space where people like her could finally thrive without being held back by prejudice or invisible barriers. That was a real win, and yet the victory felt incomplete. Deja spent the next few days reflecting. She had built something incredible, an inclusive platform that connected underrepresented communities to business resources, mentorship, and opportunities that had always been kept just out of reach. But the emotional toll had been high. The stress, the anger, the quiet battles that no one saw, it all weighed heavily on her. The spotlight, while thrilling, was also exhausting. She sat at her desk one evening, scrolling through the latest reports on the platform's success. The numbers were up, way up. New users were joining every day, and investors were beginning to show interest. But despite the success, Deja couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She fought for justice, but what had it really cost her? As she stared at the numbers, a thought crossed her mind, one she hadn't fully entertained before. What if I could do more? She thought about Tamara's words, about how the work was just beginning. She thought about the people who had supported her along the way. Liza, her friends, the mentors who had helped her understand her worth. She realized that her journey wasn't just about taking down one man. It was about building something that would outlast him, something that would continue to challenge the status quo. But it wasn't just about building a business anymore. It was about creating a legacy. It was about ensuring that the stories of those who had been overlooked, oppressed, and dismissed were finally heard. It was about shifting the power dynamic, one deal, one partnership, and one voice at a time. The next week, Deja held another meeting. This time, it wasn't with Greg. It was with a new set of potential investors, those who had reached out to her since the news about Greg's company had gone viral. They had seen the success of her platform, and they were eager to partner. But this time, Deja wasn't looking for just any investment. She was looking for the right partners, those who shared her values, who understood the importance of long-term change over short-term profits. She sat in a polished conference room, this time with a sense of calm that had eluded her before. The room was filled with people who looked the part, powerful, wealthy, influential. But Deja didn't feel intimidated anymore. She had already built something far more valuable than money. She had built the future. As the meeting progressed, Deja spoke with authority, explaining her vision for the platform's next steps. pushing for more meaningful partnerships that would benefit not only their bottom line, but also the communities they served. She spoke about the importance of creating equitable opportunities and lasting change. By the end of the meeting, she had secured a deal with investors who believed in the mission behind her business, not just the numbers. A week later, Deja stood in front of her office window, looking out over the city. The skyline was beautiful, but it was more than just a view. It was a reminder of how far she'd come. She had taken on the system. She had fought against the forces that sought to keep her down. And now, she was building something that would last, something that would change lives. In that moment, she allowed herself to smile, not because Greg had fallen, but because she had risen. She had faced injustice head-on, and rather than retreating into bitterness or anger, she had created a movement, one that was far bigger than her or any single individual. It wasn't just poetic justice. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where the future was no longer defined by the systems that had held people like her back, but by the actions of those willing to challenge them. And Deja Thompson, standing in her office, watching the world change before her eyes, knew one thing for sure: she wasn't done yet. Deja stood in the heart of her new office, surveying the space that had, in just a few short months, become the center of her world. The walls were decorated with photos of mentors, past business deals, and the faces of people who had inspired her along the way. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air, mingling with the faint hum of the city outside. Everything was still new, still fresh, but it felt like home. The past year had been a whirlwind. From the grocery store incident to fighting for a partnership with Greg, to publicly calling out the injustice and eventually turning it into a thriving business. Everything had led to this moment. Deja had built something she was proud of, something that would not only challenge the status quo, but would make a real impact on the lives of people from communities like hers. The door to her office opened, and Liza stepped inside, a wide grin on her face. "I can't believe this is real, Deja. You did it." Deja smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It's just the beginning." Liza looked around the room, her eyes scanning the sleek furniture, the polished floors, and the wall of windows that overlooked the city. "Look at you. You're a boss now. I knew you had it in you, but this is something else. You created a space where people like us can thrive, not just survive." Deja chuckled, crossing the room to pour herself a cup of coffee. "I'm still figuring out how to handle all of this. But you're right, Liza. It's about more than business. It's about building something sustainable, something that people can depend on, even when the world keeps pushing them down." The weight of those words settled in her chest. Deja knew that her work wasn't over. She had carved a space for herself in the world of business, but the mission had always been bigger than just building a company. It had been about creating a path for others to follow, so they didn't have to face the same obstacles she had. A few weeks later, Deja stood on a stage at a conference on diversity in business. The room was filled with entrepreneurs, investors, and industry leaders who were all there to discuss the future of business in an increasingly diverse world. As she looked out at the crowd, Deja felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. This was the moment she had been working toward. This was her chance to speak to a broader audience, to share her story and the story of those who had helped her get here. Her heart raced as the crowd applauded her entrance. She took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium, the microphone crackling to life as she began to speak. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I want to start by sharing a story about how we, as individuals, can make a difference, not just in our own lives, but in the lives of others." Deja paused, looking out at the audience, and then continued. "When I started this journey, I didn't know where it would take me. But I knew one thing. I was tired of waiting for someone else to give me permission to succeed. I was tired of being told that I didn't belong in certain spaces, that I wasn't good enough or smart enough or capable enough. We've all heard those voices, haven't we?" The audience nodded, a few murmurs of agreement drifting through the room. I decided, right then and there, that I wasn't going to let anyone define my worth. I wasn't going to let anyone stand in the way of my vision. And I'm here today, standing in front of all of you, because I took that first step. But more importantly, I'm here because of all of you who believed in me, who stood by me, and who made it possible for me to get here. She paused again, the weight of her words sinking in. You see, this isn't just about me. This is about all of us. It's about making sure that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles we fought. It's about making space for voices that have been silenced for too long. It's about making sure that we don't just survive, we thrive. The room was quiet for a moment before the audience erupted into applause. Deja's heart swelled as she stood there, taking in the moment. This was the culmination of everything she had worked for. This was a recognition not just of her success, but of the importance of the work she was doing. That evening, as she walked out of the conference hall, Deja took a deep breath, feeling the cool air on her face. The way of the past year, the struggles, the wins, the losses, felt like they had melted away. She wasn't just standing in front of a crowd anymore. She was standing in front of her future. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Tamara. Tamara, I'm so proud of you, Deja. You built something that matters. But don't forget, this is just the beginning. There's more work to do. Keep fighting. Deja smiled at the message. She had come so far, but Tamara was right. The work would never truly be finished. There were always more battles to fight, more systems to change, more voices to amplify. But now, Deja had something she hadn't had before, belief in herself, and the knowledge that no matter how difficult the journey, she was ready to face it. And as she looked out over the city once more, she knew one thing for sure. She was going to make sure that this was only the beginning, for her, and for everyone who followed in her footsteps.